Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Transection podcast. And thank you so much for those of us who joined us on last week's episode with Chai Chavanugase. An amazing conversation. And I think Chai really should be on more interviews because every single time that I speak to her or have any interaction with her, she brings so much value. An amazing, amazing person. This week, I'm looking forward to bringing you my conversation with Elliot Kay. Elliot is a multiple-time best-selling author and is the co-founder of Speaker Express. Elliot not only knows what it takes to build great stage presence, but is also a master at teaching business owners how to transform their messages into a powerful growth tool. Using his love of speaking to help build 3 successful businesses, Elliot has spent more than 7,000 hours on stage, speaking to audiences across Europe, Africa, the US, and the Middle East. With a passion for stretching speakers to their full potential, Elliot's down-to-earth and charismatic approach enables aspiring speakers, established speakers, investors, and business owners to quickly get the results they're looking for in an authentic and empowering way. Acting as a mentor and teacher, his success in helping hundreds of entrepreneurs use the stage to build their business led to the creation of the Speaker's Method, a proven formula to getting more growth and exposure exclusive to Speaker Express. Elliot is also the author of several books, including the best-selling Power to Succeed, and is the founder of the Thriving Entrepreneur Conference. When he's not on stage mentoring speakers or building his business empire, you can find Elliot spending time with his beautiful wife and children or training for his next half marathon. I also have had the pleasure of working with Elliot myself. I first met him at a 3-day conference in London. I think it was at the beginning of 2018, shortly before my 30th birthday. And that was a pivotal year for me. And meeting Elliot at this conference, immediately he was so warm and friendly, and you could tell it was absolutely authentic. He is a top bloke and one of my favorite coaches that I follow and have worked with. And I really feel, for me, that, obviously my speciality is in gender, and so I take note about how people express themselves, and how they do their identity, as it were. And I always feel that Elliot does his stuff and sort of expresses himself in such a lovely way. He's one of my favourite men in my professional world of friends, and I think that he is such a fantastic blend of action and also sensitivity, because I've written about this recently, actually. There is a book coming out that I've co-authored, by the way. I will tell you more about that in a future episode once I'm allowed to. But I made reference to the fact that I grew up around a lot of very old-fashioned white cishet businessmen. And whilst that taught me a lot of the logical stuff, it didn't teach me a lot of the psychological, the emotional, and maybe even the spiritual stuff, the deeper things, and what having a business and doing all that sort of thing takes out of you, in a deeper, more personal way. And I feel like in this new chapter of my life, where I spend lots of time with people who are living their principles, they're deep thinkers, they're emotionally intelligent, I definitely count Elliot as one of the men in my modern day arena that I really look up to. And he knows so much about his craft and what he teaches people. And I really hope that you enjoy our conversation today. We don't just talk about speaking, we talk about a lot of things today. And I hope you enjoy it. Before we start, do remember to go and follow us on Facebook, the Transection Podcast, Instagram at Transection Podcast, Twitter at Transection P, and even TikTok at Transection Podcast. And lastly, if you haven't signed up to our mailing list already, please go to muxharrishill.com/transection. There's a green box. You put your name and your email address in there. It takes 2 seconds. And that way you'll always be kept in the loop about what's going on and when episodes are out and all of that sort of thing. All right, here we go. In a time of great change, we're all making efforts to become more ethical, more educated people. The Transection podcast interviews people from many different backgrounds to bring different aspects of human rights to life through humour, authenticity and personal stories. We are privileged to get a glimpse into different people's realities and to get first-hand advice and information from people on the front line of great social change. I'm Harris Eddie Hill, inclusive coach, speaker and educator, and this is the Transection podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Transection podcast where I'm joined by Elliot Kay. Hey Elliot.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. The legendary podcast. And I am so excited. I can't tell you how excited I am.
Oh, thank you. I'm really chuffed. And, you know, for those who haven't kind of followed me on social media, I've talked about Elliot before because he's one of my favourite men in business.
Woohoo! Yay. That's so nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, you and I have worked with other coaches and in coaching long enough to be very used to the whole conversation around like feminine energy and masculine and stuff. And it's nice. I feel like you're a very well-rounded coach in that sense. You're very strong and very good at all of it. And I think that's nice. And particularly, yeah, you're welcome. Particularly for me, you know, I've been inundated with female coaches like, come and join my group for women. I'm like, no, thank you. And, you know, so much of their approach is very feminine, which is great. And that works for them. But, you know, I'm very much a blend of the two. So I like it when I meet other people who get that and they speak to that. So I think you do that very well.
Thank you very much. That's an honor.
So Elliot, for those who haven't come across you before, do you want to tell us a bit about, like, in brief, like what your career's been like up until now and how you got into doing what you're doing and what you have done and the books you've written and all that sort of thing?
Sure. How long have we got for the podcast? No, I'm kidding.
As long as you like.
So, yes, my name is Elliot Kay. I am the co-founder of Speaker Express, and we work with business owners and entrepreneurs to use speaking as a growth and marketing strategy and to be more giraffe, to stand out above the noise for the right reasons, and of course, win the hearts and minds of your ideal clients. I've written 4 books, 2 of them are bestsellers, and I guess, you know, back in 2010 is when I made the jump from corporate to building business, to fulfilling my journey as an entrepreneur. I run a coaching business. I was known as the coach with a hat, and I run a seminar called Power to Succeed, which is the name of my 3rd book. And then I moved into more strategic work, which is where we originally met when I was doing more strategy stuff. And then in the last 2 years or 3 years now, I've moved more into running Speaker Express full time. I've always been involved in Speaker Express, but in the last 2 years, I moved into it full time. I have 2 beautiful children and a beautiful wife, and that's what keeps me going pretty much every single day. When people ask me what my big why is, my big purpose, it's a fairly small, big one. It's to be a great father, great husband, and to impact the entrepreneurial community globally. And I think in a nutshell, that sums me up. I love running. Running's my thing, you know, in the hills of Devon. That's my go-to. But, you know, like everyone else, I've had ups, I've had many downs in my time. And I think that's what we might explore today.
Yeah, definitely. And you've not always been involved in speaking. Tell us about where you started out originally with what you wanted, once you realized what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So at the age of 21, which is only a couple of years ago now, you know, I actually decided I wanted to be a professional dancer, and I pursued that as a career. Against all odds, I auditioned for 2 dance schools, and I got into one in Leeds called Northern School of Contemporary Dance. And it's that typical, I had no money, I didn't know how I was going to pay, all that kind of stuff was going around, but I just knew I wanted to do it. And I pursued it. I worked every night in a bar, and then I worked on weekends at Harvey Nichols in Leeds to fund my way. And then after the first term, they actually gave me a scholarship because they were so impressed with my attitude and my hard work. And then I had a career as a dancer for 5 years until I got injured. I toured extensively, mainly around Europe. Did I go international? Not really. Well, I guess international around Europe. I didn't go like to the States or anywhere like that, but Spain and Germany and the Middle East a little bit. And then I got injured, and that's kind of what started me on this path. I ended up doing a bit of training for some big, huge brands. I designed the whole customer service training and stuff like that. And then I decided I wanted to be a better trainer. So I actually enrolled on a coaching course, and then it's through that I was doing my training. And it was something that a girl said to me, one of my guinea pigs as becoming a coach, because I trained in the time where you actually had to do stuff to get qualified, not just attend a weekend course, if you know what I mean. And, she said that she learned through me that she needed to be happy to lose weight and not lose weight to be happy. And that's my epiphany moment. I had like goosebumps. I was shaking. I was like, oh my God, this is what I need to do for the rest of my life. And that's what I went for. And I mean, although I don't lead with coaching now anymore, I'm still a coach. I'm still a mentor. But that was kind of, if anyone talks about a defining moment in your life, and she doesn't even know it. She doesn't know the impact she had on me. Like when she said that sentence, how much that changed the course of my career.
That's cool. So when you got injured, I mean, I think it's difficult, especially like you've had that dream for a while, and then you've worked so hard to get it. And I think people can see us like further on down the road and meet us now and think, oh, well, you've got it together. But obviously those moments are quite tough, and you don't bounce back in the space of a day.
No, I think that only happens in Hollywood, right? If even in Hollywood. No, I mean, I remember because what happened was, yeah, I mean, I had a disc hernia, and it's my 3rd disc, and it's quite wound down. I'm one of the guys typically that has it the wrong way around. I've got very flexible hips and a tight back. Most guys have tight hips and a flexible back. And so I basically gnawed away at my vertebrae because I was compensating by leaning into the hip when I danced. And I remember it happened, and I took a year off to recover. So it happened, and I stopped, and I did all kinds of things. And then it was a bit like Hollywood. 3 months before I had a deadline that I was going to go back and start dancing again. I stopped drinking coffee. I stopped drinking alcohol. I was working out every day. I was getting fit. I guess a bit like Hollywood. Got all lean again and all muscly. And then it was the last exercise of my first class. I went to kick my leg and jump, and my back went exactly again. And that was the moment I knew it was kind of game over. Unfortunately, I didn't have the resources in my mind or the tools then that I have now. And I think had I had them then, I'd probably still be dancing, but I didn't. And I went to a very dark place. In fact, actually I went to a very numb place to begin with. I kind of, I was already working as a fundraiser on the phone. I was doing the whole, hi, I'm calling from X. Would you like to donate to X? I was one of those guys because it was built around performers, and you could schedule your own time in, and you could do like 1 shift a day for 3.5 hours or 3 shifts for 10 hours, right? So it's very flexible, which is why I worked there. And I just remember I just worked. I just filled in my days and just sat there with my back really, really in pain. And I just went numb and went into kind of like existing mode. Then I went into dark mode, which is, my dream's over. Who am I? What am I? What am I if I'm not a dancer? What if I can never dance again? Pushing away pretty much most things that were good in my life, including the relationships at my time. I mean, I wasn't spiteful. I was just very kind of like cut off from everything. At the time I met a very lovely woman, and I'm sure we would have been great, but she wanted to love me. I didn't want to love her. Why? Because I wasn't sure who I was anymore. And I just kind of just kind of cut off from any sense of wanting to belong to anything.
Yeah.
So that's where I went for a few months. And then after a while, I accepted that I probably won't dance and my dance career is over. And that's when I gradually started to rebuild and I moved. And even then, I took a job in a call center hoping I'll get onto the TV channel. I don't know if you remember Bid Up TV, Price Drop TV.
Yeah.
So I went and worked in a call center going, well, I'll get on as a presenter. But of course, that never materialized at that point. Yeah. And that was that was kind of my beginning to this path I'm on now. Sometimes I still miss the dance. I miss the graft. I miss the sweat. I guess that's why I probably like running so much. But it instilled in me so many disciplines that I carry through today. I'm so grateful for my dance career, and I'm grateful for my dance training. I've just reconnected with them now, and I'm looking to actually set up some form of a fund to sponsor a dancer a year, because that's what happened to me, right? They sponsored me, and while it's 20 years later, because I'm only 23, I want to give back. That school changed my life. If anyone talks about something changing, it was definitely that school. It just changed. It made me who I am today. The discipline, the tenacity, the drive, the passion, the innovation, the reinvention. It's funny, but it all came from my 3 years at that school.
That's cool. I like that. And I sometimes think that we as a culture in general can look at those times of like being down on our luck or having gone through something or gone through some kind of loss as something to be overcome and forgotten about. But I reckon you can tell me what you think, but I reckon that you and I both understand to at least some degree actually the value and the importance of those moments, because I don't think you can start a new life or reform or rebuild yourself or kind of build a new version of yourself or move forward if you don't have those moments where you're taken down a peg or two and everything kind of falls apart for a little bit.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, for me, it fell apart big time in 2010, right? When I'd had a great year with my coaching business. I was the coach with the hat and it's all going well. I made more money than I've ever made. I was madly in love with a beautiful girl, and I did what every sensible man does and followed her to Australia. And then it all fell apart, and I'd bought a property in Cardiff. And then, of course, I'd been bankrolling it myself because it was 2 years post-recession. Plus, it was a year late when it came to market. So it was in negative equity. So I borrowed to my eyeballs to make it happen. And so, within a month in Australia, everything had fallen apart. I'd lost pretty much all of my clients because they finished and didn't renew. I'd spent all the money that I made going to Australia. The girl I was madly in love with pretty much said, it's not going to happen. I'm going to go work with that billionaire, literally a billionaire, not just a line. And the property in Cardiff, I gave it back to the bank because it was choking me. So it was like, I hit such a high only to have such a low. And you know what? If we talk again, a pivotal moments, that was one of them. I found myself on a cliff in Australia, looking down at the water, going, why me? The whole, why me? I'm a good person. I help people. Why God? Why? Screaming at the air. But that was kind of like where I really started to go deep and really heal. And it took months. There's so many aspects I needed to heal. I had to heal my relationship with love, my relationship with money, my relationship with intimacy. I had to stop elevating women and putting them on pedestals and shrinking myself down, which is what happened there, which is probably why. And we're friends, by the way, myself and this lady now. It's all good. And, I'm grateful for the lessons she taught. I wasn't grateful at the time, but I'm grateful now at the lessons she taught me, right? And yeah, I mean, I healed the sexual abuse I thought I had healed from when I was a kid. So it made me confront a lot of stuff in my life. And then I was able to move on, really, truly. You know, I met Emily, my beautiful wife now. We've got two beautiful children. But I think there's also this notion, Harris, that people think once you're done, you're done. And it's like, I find it's a never-ending process. And I feel that whatever level you've healed at, there's still another level to heal at. And people give themselves a hard time. And if ever we've talked about leveling the playing field, well, the last year for a lot of us has leveled the playing field and has got us to look at ourselves. It's been mentally hard for, I don't know anybody that hasn't struggled. And it's again, it's magnified where you might need to look and review your own life. And I think that's what come from last 12 months for me.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. You and I met through Lenka Lutonska, and I remember.
That's how you say her last name. I never knew it. There you go. I knew I could read it, but I never knew how to pronounce it. There you go. Yes, we did meet through Lenka.
Yeah, we met. Yeah, and she said to me once, I don't know if it was to me directly or if we were on a group coaching call or something, but she'd said to me, I'd said to her, like, I want to get into the feeling. I think at the time I was particularly dealing with my relationship with money, and I really wanted to see if I could get into the headspace of what it is to like have money come to you, and like in you know, a generous quantity, you know, on a kind of energetic level. And I said to her, I was like, what was it like that first 5-figure month or whatever that you had? And she said something along the lines of like, the second that it happened, she was like so happy and so overwhelmed. And then once that subsided, she was in a complete panic again, because she was like, I don't know if I could ever do that again. What if this is a fluke? What if this is the one time I'll ever experience something like this? And this is it. What if this is the high, the climax, and then I never get this ever again, and I don't know how I did it, and I can't reproduce it? And I thought that was really interesting. And I think, you know, for a long time, I struggled with feeling kind of frustrated with how life was kind of turning out, and it wasn't where I wanted to be, and I wasn't making the impact with people that I wanted to make, and equally that wasn't reflected in how much money I had and things like that. And you know, so I had this idea, like you were saying before, like I had this idea that once you got somewhere you were done. But actually she opened my eyes and she was like, it doesn't matter how far you've gone or how much money you've got or anything. There's always a new panic to have or a new anxiety to have. You might not be anxious about like paying your electricity bill after a certain point. You might feel like, oh, I've pretty much got that under control, that I can pay my bills. But the new challenge might be like, actually, can I keep XYZ going, or can I reach, you know, the goals and the kind of levels that I feel that I should be or that I want to be.
Yeah.
And that made me realize that actually being successful is still really hard. It doesn't take away any of that pain or any of that kind of insecurity or, you know, any of that doubt or uncertainty.
Yeah, look, I've got to places with my businesses, you know, this is obviously my third one, and the other two, nothing happened. I moved on, but I have been bankrupt personally because of the property in Cardiff, right? And I got to places in my business where, you know, I've always said one of my visions is to be able to go to the bank, pull out money, spend it how I choose and not worry about it. And I got to that place, you know, a few years ago. I used to go to America every end of the year. So I used to work my small behind off, you know, up until kind of November child operations, pretty much for 6 months. Mum used to live in America. So I used to go there, and I used to go out pretty much every night. Nothing too crazy, but I was able to go to the cash and pull money out, and I wouldn't worry. You know, I wouldn't go, oh, can I afford this? You know, $300 here and there, and I'm like, cool. And I'd buy a suit, and I'm like, yeah. And that's what I always wanted. And, you know, there's no climactic moment where I lost it all, but there's certainly a moment where you go, you know, it only lasts as long as it's there, right? And if any moment you don't have that top up or growth, then it disappears very quickly. And, you know, in the last 2 years, that's kind of been a bit of the case, especially with the last 12 months. We've had real spikes and then real lows with the lockdowns and things, especially in the UK. And you're very quickly reminded how quickly money runs out, how hard it is to earn and how quickly it is to run out. And I used to run workshops called Your Money Blueprint around money as well. And it is very much like your lover, right? You got to nurture the relationship. You've got to feed the relationship. You've got to respect the relationship. You've got to want it to be around. You've got to, you know, because one of the key things I used to do when I was young, I grew up in a family that had a workaholic mom and an alcoholic dad. Money was always a challenge. Always a challenge. It was never there. It was either very hard to get or my dad didn't have it. So when I grew up, and even like I remember when I had a property in Leeds a long time ago, and you know, and I bought it for 30,000 pounds. I'll give you an idea of the property prices back then. I sold it a couple of years later for 60,000. So I had about, which helped me buy the place in Cardiff. But you know, I gave myself some money to play with, and I spent that money so quickly. And even when I was touring and I made good money, I'd spend it so quickly because on an unconscious level, money represented hard work. It represented pain. So I'd get rid of it, right? And what taught me actually how to really respect it was when I went bankrupt, when I lost the property in Cardiff, and I had to literally announce like how much I'll be bringing in, and I wasn't allowed to go beyond that, and I had to sit there and justify how I'd lost all this money and all that. And that taught me to really respect money. And of course, once I got rid of that debt and really learned to respect money and value it and welcome it and, you know, nurture my relationship with it, that's when the money started to come again. However, does that mean I've hit the millions or the billions? No, not yet, because that requires another level of being, of, you know, of presence, of actions. Of course, you got to take the right actions. I can't just think I'm a millionaire. I need to provide 10 million pounds worth of value to people to probably make that million, especially these day and age, everything's very competitive. So there's a lot to be done. But I think, again, a lot of people go, well, I've reached here, I've made this much, and I'll always be there. And, you know, you'll very quickly learn that that's not the case. It's just the way it is. And the greatest road to depression is comparisons. And, you know, you were talking about, you know, and Lenka was talking about the anxiety around it. And, you know, when you reach a certain level, you're there. And I remember when I woke up when I was 42, and that's only 3 years ago. That's legitimately only 3 years ago. And I woke up really depressed, and the depression lasts for months. And that's because I had a comparison program running. I'm not, you know, I'm not living in the house I should live. We're not making the money I should make, and and all this stuff. And that led me to severe depression. And I think part of the problem is, you know, like you mentioned, Lenka said, well, there's always another level. There's always another level. Yes, but it's to approach it in an excitable way, not in a comparative way. And I think that's what a lot of people do, right? They approach it, I've got to do more, I've got to be more, I've got to make more in a comparative way. And that's really dangerous because you're looking at what isn't there, regardless of your ambitions and your goals. You go, I want to be a billionaire, I want to be a millionaire, great. Or I want to be a better person, great. I want to do fab. I'm excited about that. I want to get going. I want to make this, woohoo, like there's a buzz. But most people go, I don't have enough, I need to create more, I need to do more, I need to make more, right? And it's a hollow foundation because it's very hard to build in an empty space unless the foundations are there. And because people come from a comparative, I need more, then it's a very depressing road because it will be a lot slower, it's a lot harder, and it lacks certainty. And even if it's an unconscious level, versus the excitement about doing it, the excitement of getting there, the excitement of, oh yeah, you know. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of disconnect happens. There's a lot of the challenge because it's not easy. It's not easy to maintain that, regardless of the environment. I mean, some people just have it. They're just like, whatever they touch, you know, oh, I do this, they build a business. Oh, I do that, oh, I've sold it. It's like, okay, cool. Some people just have it. and you know, it's very small percent, but they have it. If you're one of those people, great, well done. Most of us aren't, right? Which means we have to approach things in a balanced way. We have to be real about stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think there's something like what you were just describing there reminds me of something my dad said to me that he learned from a coach like many years ago, which is if you're in a long room and there's a nice warm fire at the other end where you're looking, and there's an ice block right behind you, and it's inching closer to you, are you going to the fire because you think, oh, I love a warm fire, or are you running away from the ice block behind you? And I think that that's such a subtle distinction, but I think it goes back to what you were saying about, like, you know, are you going towards something because you're excited or you feel positive about that thing, or are you running away from the kind of freezing sort of coldness behind you, thinking, well, I need to escape this thing? And I think there's a lot of work to be done, I think, to get you to that point where you're excited about the fire and you're not constantly like, oh my God, the ice is behind me and I don't like it and I have to escape it and leave it. And, you know, I think dealing with that, like almost like that fixation on the ice behind you. I mean, I don't know what you think about it, but to me, that's a lot to do with like trauma and the programs that you were maybe taught growing up, like, oh, you know, money doesn't grow on trees and therefore you already believe that it's going to be difficult, or things like that. Like, what do you think about that, and how did you get around those things to kind of, you know, because if you're not brought up in an environment where success is possible and success is talked about and everything's difficult and everyone tells you that, like how did that manifest for you?
I mean, it's a good question. I think it's such a complicated experience, isn't it? To kind of have the ice behind us or head towards the fire. I mean, we all have our drivers, right? We all have our motives and we all have our values and our beliefs. The way it manifested for me is, you know, I lost everything I ever cared about. Well, perceptionally. I was healthy. I had arms, I had legs, I had eyes, you know, in retrospect, I had a lot going for me, and, you know, from that moment onwards, I knew I had to deal with everything that, and again, it's like, it's not just dealing with your relationship with money, because your relationship with money is a magnification of your relationships or your beliefs and your values. And so I think for me, the way it showed up is I had to take a real look at who am I as a person and who am I as a man, right? You know, not in a kind of sexist macho way, but like, who am I as a man and what is my role in this world? And that's not a straightforward process. It's not an easy answer either, right? And so the way it showed up for me is once I let go of the debt and once I went bankrupt back in 2011, then I was able to move forward, which is such a strange thing to say, right? Because most people work themselves out. I just kind of did the whole hard thing. I went, you know what, hands up, bankrupt. That created some energetic freedom for money to come into my life. So it's the whole, you know, in a way, I got rid of the ice that we're talking about. Because I was like, do you know what? I'm going bankrupt. Smash the ice. No ice behind me. Oh, look, this money can come into my life. But that doesn't mean that since then I haven't had my challenges, haven't had struggles, plenty of them around. And again, that just gets me to look at things. And, you know, especially when I had depression, it took me to listen to prayer music to ask for help. It's really weird. I was on a train into Waterloo at the time. I was living in Woking in the UK, in Surrey. And I was on the train into Woking, and all the journey I kept listening for prayer music. I was like, gospel, Jewish, you name it. I was going, prayer music, I need prayer. And I knew that was my soul shouting for help. Like, come on, I need help here. Because I'd done the mindset thing. I had coaches, I've got the tools, and, you know, I was doing them. Clearly it wasn't working because I was still waking up with dark thoughts. I was still depressed. I was still like stuff was going on. And then when I reached out to my friend who's a spiritual healer, we started to have these conversations, and she was talking about how my spiritual bank is very low and I need to top down, like Detienne and all these kind of things. And then I was like, oh, okay. So to answer your question, the way it showed up later on in my life was depression, because I was comparing, right? The ice behind me, um, it was like, yes, it wasn't just pushing me, it was showing me, it's almost like there was a sketch behind it of what I should be having, pushing me. And I was looking back going, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Oh, I don't have that. I don't have that. So then I dealt with that and I came over that, which is why I stopped doing strategy and moved into Speaker Express full time. And I had to make some big decisions because I had a successful business. There was cash flow. I had clients. So it wasn't a case of, oh, I've run to the end of the road here. But I had to make the tough decisions and stop certain activities. And that's how I had to do it. And that's what showed up for me. And that was the path I took. And of course, going into the business full time, I had a business partner, and then we learned a lot about how we work and how different we were. And again, that ended up in a bit of a divorce. We're friends now, but she left the business and I carried it on. And loads of lessons. I mean, even the last year, things have just shown up in a way unexpectedly, financially. And, you learn very, very quickly when you are restricted and when a market is restricted, about your relationship with money and their relationship with money too.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. So why speaking, Elliot? I mean, we could talk all day about the he's still there.
Yeah, yeah, my camera changed.
Right. So I mean, we could talk all day about the kind of mechanical or logical reasons that speaking is good, but what do you think about it on a deeper level than that, or what does it mean to you, and why do you think it's so important?
The reason I think it's so important is because, again, if we talk about magnifiers, which seems to be a theme of this talk, speaking is a magnifier, right? There's nowhere to hide when you're speaking. It's probably one of the biggest magnifying glasses you can put over yourself. It exposes everything: your confidence, your communication, your ability to enroll, to impact, to deliver. And to me, there's just such a reward when you're seeing people, really have an impact, have a drive, have a message. And when I work with amazing people such as yourself, and I work with a variety of, industries, and I see that fire awaken in them, and they see, like, again, that glass behind them smashed. I mean, the ice, not the glass, smashed. And they're moving towards using their voice for good, for the right reasons. They're going towards that fire, but that fire is now in their belly, right? And they're like, it's just great. And, in the last year, I've worked with a variety of MDs and CEOs and people raising investment and investors. And when I see, the process that we went through, and I see them at the end of that, and I see their results, whether it be financial or client-based or whatever, that's why. It's that moment. I talk about that moment in my book. I talk about the moment you've arrived as a speaker at Speak Influence Align. That's it. And that's my moment. And that's why, for me, speaking.
Yeah, that's cool. So much of what you're doing is, you're so open-hearted in the way that you do things, and you're so open to learning about things that you don't know and talking to people who are maybe underrepresented. Has that always been a value of yours, or is that something you feel like you've come to in more recent years?
It's a good question. I'd like to say that I've always been this way. I think that's the right answer to answer the question. If I put my hand on my heart, I don't know if I've always been this way. I think there's probably been a time where I didn't understand enough to think that way. But certainly, in the last decade, and you can't be a coach if you're not able to enter the other person's model of the world, right? I mean, it doesn't mean I get it completely, but if I can't be empathetic to it, then I can't be a very good coach. And I think since becoming a coach, which is now over a decade ago, I've certainly understood a lot more, to the point where I've even had arguments with people in the sense like, so what, if a terrorist was sitting there, you'd be able to, understand and respect that person's model of the world? I'm like, well, I'd certainly listen to it. Doesn't mean I'd agree with it. Um, and that's the thing, step number one of being a coach is the ability to understand that person's model of the world. So in the last decade, I can hand on heart say yes. But prior to that, I'd be lying if I told you I knew the answer. I'd like to say yes, but I don't know, because I don't know if that was in my reality then or
Yeah,
important enough for
likewise.
me.
Yeah, it's the same for me. And I have to say, like, I've been running my online space all about gender identity for nearly 7 years, like pretty much
Wow.
since I came out. And I feel like my approach to those conversations and people who come along to kind of poke a bit or maybe be a bit inflammatory, my approach and my response to those things is so much more grounded and balanced since training as a coach, because I can understand that what they're saying from their point of view is absolutely true, even if they're completely misguided, they don't really know what they're talking about. And, if they're kind of stating something as a fact when actually everyone else's experience is vastly different,
Right.
I feel like meeting them where they are, and also think like asking the question, like, do you want us to kind of be able to have a conversation about this and come together? And actually, a lot of the time, they don't want to. They just want to vent and kind of, metaphorically fling poo at people. And then
Yeah,
you,
you just
well,
want to be right.
yeah, in that case, we're just incompatible. We're just not going to get on. And
Yeah,
actually, it's not my job to convince anybody, and equally, it's not their job to convince me of their model either.
agreed.
Um,
Yeah.
is that a skill that you've picked up and that's been particularly like important, and maybe even pivotal for you, especially in, because like you've talked on interviews before about like having a difficult history with your dad, and I'm sure like we all come across it in other humans anyway. But has that been particularly like healing or helpful for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, to be honest, I just very choosy where I put my energy, which
Mm,
is why I don't get involved in political debates. Definitely not online, or I don't get involved in to be honest, I express my view, um, but I'm very selective when and where, right? Because like you say, it's not my job to change people's minds. Those who are going to fight to be right probably won't change their minds. I'm not a politician. I'm not a campaigner. I gladly get behind campaigners and those people who want to really fight for justice and things like that. Um, and so my skill that we're talking about here has definitely benefited me because I'm able to remain balanced and composed, even when I'm hearing some terrible things, or and I'm just able to. It's not blasé, it's not passe, and I'm not numb to it. But it's, do I want to put my energy into this? And that's whatever the answer is, okay. And for me, I'd rather put my energy in supporting people who I know can have a great voice. And that's where my energy is better served versus me going, and if I feel something strong, I'll express it if it's strong enough. It's funny because everyone, like my wife and my friends, talk about my invisible line. And it's like, it's a line that once you cross, you'll know about it. But there's nothing beforehand, if you know what I mean. And it's
yeah,
not a threat. It's not like, ooh, be careful. It just comes. It's just
yeah,
like, bam, you've crossed the line.
yeah,
And that really takes a lot to get there because, yeah, I'm very composed. I'm very balanced. I'm quite laid back in many ways because my energy is spent on other things. And I just don't have the energy to convince people that might come into your room that they're wrong and they're misguided. And I'd rather spend my energy supporting someone like yourself to be able to go out there and speak about it and communicate it versus argue with someone. I can count on one hand how many times Emily and I have argued. Now, that doesn't mean we agreed on everything, but we would discuss things straight away. Again, because it's that I'm happy to say what I want to say when I want to say it. So if I choose to shut my mouth, it's because I'm choosing to shut my mouth and not because I'm scared to open my mouth. Does that?
yeah. I like that. Yeah, it's good, and I do think that there is that thing. I know that for me, like for many years, I was very kind of codependent, and I would sort of be in relationships or friendships and be like, oh, if only I could explain well enough that they're in the wrong, then then they'll understand, and then and then they can do what I think they should be doing, and then it will solve the problem.
Which didn't happen, right?
No, and I wasted so much time with people who were, completely incompatible with me, or ultimately, I would spend so much of my time like thinking about them and their problems and like how I could help them. It was always completely in earnest, but it was a complete waste of time and effort, because ultimately I was disrespecting how they were doing life, even if I could see that they were in a terrible cycle that seemed to never end. Like, it wasn't really any of my business. So, for me, I think similarly to you, I've reached a point of just asking myself, like, are we compatible? Is there opportunity here? And if there isn't, then just walk away.
Right.
And
Exactly.
don't you find,
If someone
yeah,
comes into your room like, look, here's what I think, I'm open to learn, or
yeah,
can you explain to me that's different, versus I'm going to come in and I'm going to give you my opinion and I'm right and you're wrong, and no, you just obviously there's certain areas of politics where I actually am very passionate, but I just never get involved in the conversation, because certainly online you're going to have very little influence, if any, and all you're going to do is goad more. So I don't bother.
yeah, that's fair enough. And don't you find as well that in saving that energy and not getting involved in those dynamics, that you actually end up attracting more of the right kind of clients and friends and stuff?
Yeah, and you're just happier for it, and you're not always checking your phone to see who's commented what and how could they say that and who you need to block and who you need to remove. I'll give you just a very little example. A few weeks ago, I don't know if you saw it, I posted like a picture of the Queen after getting an injection, and she's like taking a selfie, and I think you might have seen it. And
Yeah,
obviously they reshaped her to look really fit, and and it's just like a joke, right? It's a
yeah.
joke. And this one woman was like, how dare you? That's the Queen. She deserves respect. It was like, I started to write a response like, no, I just deleted her and blocked her. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to start this online war over a Queen who I respect, but has zero knowledge of my life, and I just posted a joke on my feed, on my Facebook, you
Yeah.
know, it's like coming into my room and telling me not to tell a joke in my house. It's like, no, sorry, you're out. You know what I mean?
And also, you've got to have a bit of a humor bypass, because
Yeah.
I laughed at that, because I thought it was more poking fun at the whole, how extreme people's reaction to the vaccinations are. And by the way, I'm not like I think it's fine to ask questions and to be informed, and I've got no issue with that, but I have seen some very extreme reactions. So I laughed for that reason, because I thought this idea that this tiny little vaccine would transform you so dramatically. Like my dad had his first injection a couple of days ago. When he got home, I asked him, "Can you hear the 5G towers yet?"
Yeah. No, it's good to ask questions. You should always ask questions. Yeah, it's just a bit of like humor. I like a bit of
Yeah,
joke, me, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Quite a funny guy, really. Just have to convince my wife
But
that.
she never laughed. She's always like, "Oh,
She does, but it's a typical like, I get
this
that kind of
again."
kind of frown or look or roll of eyes. Every now and then she'll laugh.
Mm.
And then I say, I'm funny. She goes, yes, you're hilarious. That's why I married you. I'm like, okay.
I'm laughing on the inside.
Yeah, one of those. My sides are splitting on the inside. So yeah.
So Elliot, what advice would you give to people like me who are kind of in the world of activism and want to get our message out there, and want to influence people for positive reasons towards like listening and being empathetic and including people and educating and stuff? What advice would you give to people like me?
I think the biggest advice I would give is A, you've got to stick to your guns, but B, you have to accept what's going to come your way. That doesn't mean you have to like it. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but you've got to understand that when you're going against the status quo, or you're changing paradigms, or you're campaigning to change, in effect, a whole way of thinking, which is what you're doing, you're going to be met with resistance. And I wish I had a much more woohoo kind of message, but it's learning to deal with the resistance, which will build your strength as a campaigner. Because the people that agree with you, agree with you. The people that believe in you, believe in you. It's the others you're up against. So I would say you've got to obviously stand your ground, fight your ground, but you've got to learn to maneuver within the rejection. And bit by bit, you can win people over. It's certainly not an overnight thing. It's going to take time. I don't know how long. Some people, it's taken them beyond their lifetime to see the change that they've always wanted to see with special campaigning. We work with someone called Emily Hunt, who has been in the press a lot. She basically, I'll tell you this very quickly because we need to wrap up. But basically, she went for lunch. She woke up in a stranger's hotel room, naked, no clothes, didn't remember any of it. This is all online, so I'm not telling you anything that she hasn't told in the press. And they made a mess of the whole thing. Basically, she was drugged and sexually abused. And because I don't know the ins and outs, but basically the whole thing was a shambles. And so she couldn't prosecute her attacker for various reasons. Too many gaps, too many holes, and not enough evidence kind of thing. So she campaigned to change the law around voyeurism because he'd filmed her without her consent. Now, up until last year, it was legal, but she campaigned to change that. And then she managed to prosecute him for voyeurism because they had it on his phone. So he finally got some form of sentencing and naming as well. And she had to deal with so much abuse, but she had to stick to her guns. And you can imagine the abuse she got. It's your fault. You're a slut. You got drunk and you effed him, and it's you there and you regret it. You can imagine, and it's endless, especially if you're on the Daily Mail, right? Right, because that's the kind of platform
Daily
that's
fail.
abusive comments. So, but she stuck to her guns, and not only that, she's just been hired by the CPS to review. So it might take more than 5 years, it might take 10, it might take 20. But when you stick to your guns and you're willing to deal and maneuver within the resistance, that is where the magic will happen. And and that's who I want to get behind, right? I'd love to support people who campaign that way. But you got to understand it's not an easy journey, and it's a slow journey. And then all being well, it becomes a movement, right? But you just have to really, really stick to your guns, and you gotta argue intellectually, not emotionally, especially when you're dealing. Emotions will drive you, intellect will define you.
Yeah, I think that's the really challenging part, because I know that. I mean, I think I said recently, didn't I, that I went to go and speak at a summit. I got so passionate about what I was saying that suddenly I was like, there are tears like literally in my eyes. So I had to take a moment to have a breath and compose myself and really kind of get ahead of this like tearful moment. And I don't think there's any shame there, but I do think it's so much more compelling if you can be kind of balanced and grounded in that moment of talking about what you're talking about, without getting really emotional and upset. And I think that's so difficult, especially if you're campaigning like she did. Like I think I'm so in awe of Emily Hunt, because, and I have heard about her before. I can't imagine going through all of this like over and over again to finally get here after having gone through something so extreme, and then having to live with it and then convince people and be balanced and really advocate without just getting upset and throwing furniture. Like,
I'm
you know,
sure
if
she did
somebody,
plenty of that.
yeah.
Without doubt. I mean, again, very, very quick example. I worked with Philly, who was a MasterChef Professionals last year. She came in the top 4, which is like the Olympics of cooking in the UK. And she said one word, She called one of her dishes. She said, this is a retake on Asian food. I just wanted to capture something like, I can't remember the word she said. I mean, I remember the word, but I don't want to say it. And she got so much abuse. All she was saying was, it's a take on, it's a bit like when you're hungover and you eat this food. It's like that. And she got so much abuse and like thousands of emails. And she was coming from such a good place. Now, that's a cooking competition. Take a sexual case, right? Where everyone has an opinion and is emotionally charged around it.
Mm.
Yeah, she threw lots. I mean, at times she was on the phone to me, but she kept going. Kudos. And she won an award. She won the Piper Award or the Piffer Award, or I can't remember exactly, for her achievements. So yeah.
Yeah,
So
amazing.
by all means, maybe we should grab her, put her on this podcast. I think we're a great interviewee.
Yes, that would be fab.
I'll connect you guys.
Elliot knows everyone.
Don't know about everyone. I know a few people, but yes,
Yeah.
in that respect.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, she sounds incredible, and I'd very much like that. So yeah, that would be awesome.
Cool. I'll connect you.
Lastly, Elliot, if people want to work with you, or what kind of things do you offer, and how can they get in touch with you, and what is it you specifically help people with?
Brilliant. So I help people use speaking to market themselves or grow their businesses, but of course to campaign if they need. So we have a variety of offerings. I think the best thing to do is to get in touch with me, hello@speakerexpress.co.uk. You can follow us on the various social medias. There's also Standout Academy on Instagram. There's I am Elliot Kay on Instagram. That's more me. You get my kids, you get my running. So reach out. Let's book a call. Let's have a conversation. I think that's the best way to do it versus me listing everything, because we have different offers according to where you are, different services, and that's the best way. So hello@speakerexpress.co.uk. Just say Harris in the title, and I know where you've come from, and then we'll go from there. I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. And I have to say, like, for me, as somebody who, I feel like I have such an important message, and as I've said before, like, I'm an introvert, and I just thought that I would be happily introverted and not on any kind of stage or platform. So it's been really absolutely essential to be supported by people who know the speaking game. And working with Elliot last year, we've still got a little bit left over to do when I've got a minute.
Yes, we do.
But it's been amazing, and actually I was able to put together a talk, or at least the first draft, in a way that was really authentic, and it really made sense. And I was like, it really still felt like my talk. It didn't feel like somebody had given me a template and was like, here you go, do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we want. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elliot.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode with Elliot Kay. Go and have a look at his books if you're a book sort of a person. It's really good. Oh, and also Elliot, in recent times has been leading a campaign, and you can go and look at the hashtag online. It's hashtag bemoregiraffe. And this was all in the lead up to him releasing this new book. I haven't got the date just yet, but it is imminent. It is imminently going to be with us. And Be More Giraffe is all about visibility, and it's a mixture of practical advice, teaching you about how to be visible, and then the actual steps that you need to take. I don't know about you or whether you're entrepreneurial or not, but if you are, then you likely would have been exposed to many different people talking about visibility and marketing. And so much of it seems very complicated, and people are telling you what's worked for them, and it really, feels like they're speaking another language that you don't speak. And it can end up feeling like so overwhelming, and like it takes hours of your life. And I, in recent times, have decided that if it's not simple, I'm not going to do it. And I have actually had a sneak peek of this book. I've been very privileged to have a look, and it is so simple. And it was a breath of fresh air, because I think we can be inundated, particularly as business owners and entrepreneurs, with stuff Like, oh, you have to do this and you have to have all of these different things. And actually, I don't agree with that. I think that being visible and getting out there and being marketed well is actually really simple. It shouldn't feel overwhelming. And I think that Elliot's new book is perfectly in line with that. So if you're currently undergoing anything that seems complicated and you're not feeling it, ditch it and pre-order this new book. It's Elliot Kay, Be More Giraffe. So anyway, thanks again for joining us this week. Next week, I am going to be speaking to someone from the Mermaids charity in the UK. If you haven't heard about the Mermaids charity, they support young trans and non-binary people and their families, and they've done lots of good work for many years. And Jake, who is the person that I interviewed from the charity, does lots of sort of outreach, and the sort of is a bit of one of the public faces of the charity, and is actually trans non-binary themselves. And it was really nice to hear from them and hear about what the charity's doing, and also just get to know Jake as an individual. You know, so much of my time is spent with the general public, or people who are not involved in my industry of teaching and coaching around gender identity. So it was really lovely to catch up with them, and I look forward to bringing that to you next week. Until then, friends, stay safe and have fun.